Welcome to Two Hypnotherapists Talking with me, Denise Mejia, in Delaware, USA.
And me, Martin Ferber, in Preston, UK.
This weekly podcast is for anyone and everyone who'd like to know more about the fascinating subject of hypnosis and the benefits it offers.
I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and psychotherapist.
I'm a retired medical doctor turned consulting hypnotist.
We are Two Hypnotherapists Talking.
So let's get on with the episode.
Okay, well, welcome to another edition of Two Hypnotherapists Talking. And Denise and I have got hypnosis royalty as guests today. We have no other than Larry and Cheryl Elman in the States. And I am absolutely delighted beyond words that you've joined us. Thank you.
As am I.
Thank you. So now it's two by two hypnotists today.
Yes. Double the hypnosis. But I think we should start way back when. Larry, obviously, with the name Elman, you've known about hypnosis for quite some time. Could you give our listeners just a little taste of what it was like growing up in Dave Elman's house or on the road with Dave?
Yeah, probably the thing that'll amuse most of you most and may put this in perspective. My father had been in vaudeville, and when vaudeville failed, which would be around 1920, he found himself unemployed in New York City. And at that time in New York City, a fast way to get yourself arrested was to either be or claim to be a hypnotist. So he never mentioned it. If you're in vaudeville, you need to be an understudy to the adjoining acts. So if somebody gets sick, the show must go on. In fact, I remember from age 3 being told, the show must go on. So he never told anybody, and he spent several years, musician, songwriter, actor, etc., trying to move into radio, which was the big coming technology. And he finally gets a radio show started in 1937 called Hobby Lobby. So my father wanted to put a hypnotist on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And the lawyers and the network and everybody got all panicked. What happens if somebody in the audience driving a car goes into trance and kills themselves? We'll be sued.
Mm-hmm.
My father knew doggone well that this is an avoidable non-problem. Had to pretend he was not a hypnotist, knew nothing about it, and convince them.
Mm-hmm.
So he's done a job on this. And meanwhile, as I say, he had not admitted to being a stage hypnotist. So finally, in what I believe was the first show of Hobby Lobby in 1949, he has as his guest a hypnotist who proceeds to blow his act. He's got a dozen people up on stage. Half of them don't go into trance. He gives a suggestion. It's ignored. Now, meanwhile, I'm at that point, parents thought was asleep in the car, but of course, you know, kids, they're not asleep in the car. They're listening. Has heard my parents discussing the fact that if the show gets blown, we lose a sponsor, we're out of work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting in the studio audience watching this, and I'm nervous. And suddenly my father steps forward and says, Mr. whoever it was, you've done such a wonderful job. I'll bet these people would even take suggestions from me.
Uh-huh.
The hypnotist knows that he's in trouble. And he says, the next voice you hear will be Dave Elman, do whatever he says. And he runs off stage. And my father immediately goes into his old vaudeville. And it works. Of course it works. No reason it shouldn't. And we go to the garage to get the car to drive home. And as we get there, my mother stands with her hands on her hips, her head slightly tilted, and her body slightly tilted. It's a position that everybody in the family knows. When mom gets into that position, she's going to
listen.
And she said, "So, Dave, how is it that you know more about hypnosis than the hypnotist?" And I see her ask that question. I see my father turn brick red and say, "Because I was a stage hypnotist." And that was the first time that my mother knew this. And they've been going together since 1921 or 22. And this is 49. They've been married in 27.
So, you know how some movies start in the middle? Well, so I would just like to pan back. So that we're in 1949 now.
Okay.
How did Dave get interested? How did he even know about hypnosis? He was
Yes.
born in 1900 in Park River, North Carolina. North Carolina, North Dakota. We're in North Carolina, in North Dakota. And then he was quite young when they moved to Fargo, which is where he grew up. His father, Jacob Kopelman, and his last name is actually Kopelman. And when he was in show business, it was too many letters for top billing and a marquee. So he had dropped the KOP and it just became Elman. So his father was a hobbyist and very fascinated with hypnosis, and had books. And so Dave happened to went, and his dad hypnotized somebody for stuttering. And while the child was in hypnosis, they stopped stuttering. But as soon as he brought them out, he had no concept of post-hypnotics and how to structure them, suggestions. So it went away. So Dave was like, well, this doesn't really work. And then when he was 8 years old, his dad had cancer and was in a lot of pain and couldn't get out of bed. And a hypnotist stopped by the house. We're not quite sure who. There's been discussions on who it could have been, but stopped by the house to visit Dave. Dave actually had a traveling salesperson business, and he sold.
Jake had the.
Jake, his dad. Sorry,
my grandfather.
And he would go to different towns, and he would meet hypnotists from vaudeville troupes along the way too. So he got to know people. So this person came by and hypnotized him, and really dulled his pain, where he was able to get out of bed and play with the kids, and actually left on a trip to bring in some money to do some collections, and he died on the train. But what Dave saw was how hypnosis had changed his father and taken away and dulled the pain enough that he was able to get out of bed for the first time in a long time. Right. And that stuck in his mind. So at 8 years old, when everybody was, claiming what they wanted from their dad, Dave claimed the hypnosis books. So, but he started teaching himself and reading, and it was Hippolyte Bernheim that he read and read how he could, if you hypnotized somebody this week and they would go deeper, and then the next time you hypnotize them, the next week they'd go even deeper, quicker. And then Dave in his youth was like, yeah, but if you just hypnotized him and sent him out to the waiting room and brought him back in and hypnotized him and took him back out to the waiting room, and then he was like, but wait, why don't you just put him in hypnosis and bring him out, take him down, bring him out, take him down. Thus was
hence
the Dave Elman Induction, which he never called the Dave Elman Induction. He called it the 3-minute routine, or 3 trips to Bernheim, because it was Hippolyte Bernheim that he got concept from. So that started it. He practiced on kids in the schoolyard, and then he sort of had that subside because not many fathers wanted their daughter dating a hypnotist. So it was, as he would put it, was stunting his social life. Larry would have put it that it stunted his sex life. So, here it is like years later. So that is how it started. And then when he was in vaudeville, they had to be able to play a variety of different characters. So hypnosis was one of them. He played the violin, he played the saxophone, he did comedy, and so he was in vaudeville. Today, or back in my days, the kids wanted to run away to the circus. He wanted to run away to vaudeville. And then it picks up where he was in New York and he loved radio. He would pick up all different kind of jobs in radio. And when some doctors came up to him and told him that they would like him to come and teach them hypnosis. He goes, I don't know anything about medicine, but Larry, do you know the 3 things that they told him that he had?
So there was this committee of doctors, all of whom had been to multiple of his shows, and they'd seen what, from their point of view, was a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And when he said, I don't know medicine, I can teach hypnosis, but get somebody else because I don't know medicine, they said, we're going to tell you the 3 things you've got with hypnosis that are important to a doctor and are why we're asking you. First of all, you have a very rapid induction. All of the members of the committee had been through a hypnosis school that was used by the doctors in the area. But the hypnosis school taught that an induction takes 20 to 40 minutes. You don't have 20 to 40 minutes per patient. It isn't available.
You don't even have that now for the whole appointment.
Exactly. And they said, so your induction takes a matter of seconds or at worst a minute or 2. We've seen that on stage repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
That would make hypnosis available to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is the hypnosis school taught us that only 40 to 60% of humanity can ever be hypnotized. That makes it unusable for the doctor because he doesn't know whether this can be or can't be. But we are watching you get between 95% and 100 means you know something they don't. And finally, and this is the important one, every post-hypnotic you've given on every show we've seen has been followed. If a physician gives a post-hypnotic suggestion, it needs the same reliability as the prescription script that you hand to the patient to take to the drugstore. Yep. If you can teach us those 3 things, you'll have taught us medical hypnosis.
Yes, exactly.
So the course opened with those 3 things being what was announced and what was pushed. I attended the course starting in about August of 1950, which means I was probably in the 3rd or 4th course that he gave. The introduction that those are the 3 things we're going to concentrate on, with Dad at that point saying to the doctors, remember, you know medicine, I know hypnosis. I want the class handled like a seminar, in that I want you feeling free to ask questions or to bring up ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I will learn from you as you learn from me. Because if you look back at society at that time, physicians were way up here.
I know, I miss those days, but yeah.
Town, they were totally respected. So for this guy off of a stage to say, I will respect you, meant that they should respect him.
Yeah.
So, Larry, can I just interrupt you there, Larry? Would this time period, that would coincide with when the American Medical Association and the British Medical Association both state, what were the statements they made, Denise, about using hypnosis in medicine?
And well, they all said that, but both of them said it should be part of the standard medical education. It should be part of our general armamentarium, just as drugs and surgery are. So this should be, and it's, again, it's complementary. The problem is when people try to make everything gets very, very popular. It can do this, and it can do this, and now it can do the laundry, and it can do this, and then it fails to do one thing, and it's like throw it all out again. And I'm just so fed up with this. We're constantly reinventing the wheel. This is such an incredible. You have to chop this out. I'm on my soapbox.
You're exactly correct.
This is the point of hypnosis. It helps a doctor support their patient so they can follow the things they need to do because everything affects your health. Your attitude to your doctor affects your health. Placebo, terrible word. Don't ever use. That's 50% of medicine. You write them a prescription. The placebo of writing them a prescription does a lot of the work. Anyway, sorry, you're not interviewing me.
No,
Talk to Larry.
what I'm pushing. We're simpatico. Thank you.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm leaving it all in.
Please do.
You know, it is interesting because in medicine, if a doctor makes a mistake, they may get sued, but they don't automatically lose their license, and they don't automatically all around the world go, medicine doesn't work.
Exactly.
But just as you were saying, Denise, that when there's an incident with a hypnotist, maybe they did something beyond their scope of practice.
I was thinking, actually, most of the bad press that we get are when people are doing stage shows for freshmen at university, and they've got a huge audience. You can't monitor such a huge audience, so somebody will have an abreaction. Not dangerous, unpleasant, but not dangerous, with no real sequela, to be totally medical. But it gets plastered in all the newspapers, and unfortunately, that means that people say, "Oh, that won't work then. Hello, pussycat." And so, yeah, I must admit I have a prejudice against stage shows, but not because I don't respect the abilities of those hypnotists, but because I worry that so many people see them and think, it's a trick. You almost need, like, here's this little booklet of what we're doing today, so people can know more about what's actually happening.
But in a stage show, there's all hypnotists are created equal, but some are more equal than others. Same thing with stage hypnotists, Well,
and it also depends on what you want out of the experience. So,
right. So for some people, I would totally disagree on the stage hypnosis. I think it's got to be done tastefully done and very GP, and and I always think that it's a good stage show has somebody also sitting in the on the sidelines. So if they are seeing an abreaction or something,
but again, one person, if you've got 200 people in the room, is going to be very difficult.
When Dad started teaching, he bought the heaviest damned medical dictionary that I think was ever printed. It was huge, and it went with him to every class. And every time a word came up in the class that was in medical jargon, read the definition and memorize it every single time. So that by the end of a year or two of this, he spoke medicine as well as the doctors did.
Excellent.
And if they brought something up he didn't understand, Dr. So-and-so, would you please explain that? There may be specialists in the room who are in a different field than you are, which is a polite way of getting it explained to everybody and getting everybody on the same track. Right. And I was there for that type of discussion again and again and again.
So I just wanted to say, one of the things when Dave was teaching his course, as he would come up with some newer evolving techniques of his own, because as he taught, Larry took the course 3 times, it kept changing, but it was the doctors themselves that would field test the concepts, and they would come back with new techniques that they came up with. There was a pediatrician who came up with the idea of the magic spot, which was for kids, especially back in the days where it had alcohol in the pad and they would wipe them before they got the injection. He put some food coloring in there, some dye, and told them that this was like the magic, the latest magic potion. They will not be able to feel a thing. That it's just not going to bother them in the least. And then he taught the kids how to move the spot from here to here, or maybe they skinned their knee and they can move it to there. They got to keep their spot, and it was phenomenal. So he shared that, and other doctors started doing it. But the funny part of it was that weeks later, that he got to his office and there were parents lined up because they wanted their own magic spot.
We're going to segue into touring the world with the Elmans. Go on, Cheryl.
This is the exact thing that we're talking about. because when we were touring the world, and we have taught in 17 countries, some of them 2, 3, and 4 times over the last 13 years. So we actually started the touring in 2011. So in doing these tourings, most of these people were already hypnotists, and they were taking our course as an additional. So I think, just like anything, if somebody were to go ahead and go to medical school, and they never did any continuing ed, or they went to the basic medical school, you know, if you've ever talked to specialists, we have some specialists in our family, and if I have something like a general question, you know, one's an OBGYN, so if I call and I said, you know, I have a medical question, she'll say, well, if it doesn't have to do with the vagina, I can't help you. so you know, or as opposed to if somebody's more of a GP, they've kept up with more. Well, it's similar. If you take your hypnosis course and you're not doing things with it, and you're not continuing to take additional courses and additional training, that in itself is going to make the difference between a good doctor and a great doctor, or a doctor and a great doctor, or a hypnotist and a great hypnotist. It's very important to learn different techniques, to fill your toolbox.
Absolutely.
You know, to keep up in medicine with the latest and greatest tools and procedures that are out there that people have discovered. You know,
absolutely, Cheryl. Over here in the UK, the 2 main associations that I've joined, the National Council for Hypnotherapy and the Complementary Natural Healthcare Council, both insist on a specified number of CPD, continued professional development, hours per year that you've got to do these extra courses, because you never know everything that there is to know. There's always something else to learn. There's always other people to learn from.
And there are always people developing further. You know, the Elman
absolutely.
The Elman Induction is a great basis, but there's lots of little twiddly bits that you can add that with some clients will help them more. And that's the other thing. You have to know each person is different. So you've got to have more than one string to your bow. Oh,
absolutely. And getting back to what you were saying about in training, etc., having the clinical hours experience before you let loose on your own, it's, you know, it's vital that you get those clinical hours in training. But I'm not sure if we're up to that bit yet or not, but I'm intrigued to know more about this Dave Elman Legacy Conference that's happening.
So this is our second conference. The first one we did in June of 2021. And it's like Larry's 84 today is his birthday. Happy birthday.
Yeah, many happy returns.
And I'm now 70, and we want to keep Dave Elman's legacy, his teachings, alive. And there are some, as you said, Martin, there are some countries where people aren't even aware of Dave Elman techniques. His induction, which only takes anywhere from 1 to 4 minutes, it's built on tests and convincers. And some people are afraid to test because what if the test goes wrong? Yeah. So that's
roll with it.
That's part of our training, is all the troubleshooting you can do, and what do you do if, and his overall client-centered techniques, instead of just reading a script that could be good for everybody and nobody, you know. You know, sometimes something comes up in a script and you're hitting somebody's fear. You know, what one person's safe place is another person's nightmare. So you know, and not everybody wants to be on the beach. That can be very scary for someone.
That's your thing, isn't it, Denise?
Yeah. My first time I was hypnotized by a fellow student. I had never been hypnotized before, and I do want to talk about how your first experience with hypnosis. So that's really important. But my first experience was a fellow student a few months ahead of me in the course, and he's very American, and I am, despite having lived here for almost 50 years, I'm still pretty English. And he says, and we're going to the beach. And so I'm picturing, you know, a childhood beach. And he said, and you walk over to the fire. And, what the hell's a there doing the page. It snapped me right out of it. It was so weird. So anyway, sorry, I digress. Please tell me, Cheryl, Cheryl, tell me, when was the first time you were hypnotized? Because it was not when you met the Elmans. It was quite a while before, right?
Correct. It was in the early 90s. And I decided to stop smoking. Actually, I got hypnotized once before that. So it was in the in the 80s, mid 80s. I went to a group hypnosis session down in Fort Lauderdale area, and for smoking. And I did stop smoking. I was 2 to 3.5 packs a day smoker. Back then, you could smoke
serious smoker.
everywhere.
Yeah.
I was a serious smoker. Or it was burning out in the ashtray, or I was lighting my cigarette and there was still one in the ashtray. So
Kind of
yeah,
like me and coffee.
Been there, done that.
yep. So I started playing shortly after, holding somebody's cigarette. Oh, let me light that for you, and I just played what they would call, playing on the tracks, so to speak. I think they would put in AA. And so I stopped, I started smoking shortly, like a few weeks later, I was back to where I was. So when I was in New York, I decided, I really wish, I went on for a one-on-one, I really wish I remembered the name of the person who hypnotized me, because years later, I probably got to meet them. I think I had 2 sessions, and I had stopped on the first and never started again. I went for the second one and I was already stopped, and I never picked up another cigarette again.
Brilliant.
And
Well done.
yeah, and I think, I meant to look this up and I forgot. I did a chart of if I had continued smoking, what would I have spent? And I did it in the yesteryear prices
Money.
of cigarettes, but I also did it in what's that evaluate to today in today's dollars or pounds. And it was like an eye opener. It could have bought a house.
And part of what you probably didn't add was what were the added medical costs you would have had you continued to smoke.
I had a heavy, heavy, heavy cough. In fact, I lived 2 floors above the rest of the family, and I would wake up in the morning. I feel good. I didn't cough at all last night.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Parents, and they could hear me 2 floors up. You didn't, so yeah, and the smell, and there were just so many things I really didn't like about it. And the more I didn't smoke, the more I loved being a fresh air breather.
Just a second though, I hadn't heard the story of course, the story of Larry's mother and her hands-on hip moment with her husband. But you had a similar, not quite as strong, but a similar response when you found out that Larry was. Could you tell that story very briefly?
Absolutely. When Larry and I started dating, he went to a nutritionist, and actually he lost 80 pounds.
82 pounds.
82 pounds going to this person. He had gone there the week before, and he was looking at a certificate from Jerry Kine up on the wall. And so she's looking at him, looking at the and at the certificate, and she's going, Elman, 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 are you? And he goes, yes, I'm the son. So now he knows hypnosis, right? And the next week, she wanted to meet the person that he eats with most, because my husband's a rocket scientist, literally. But at the same time, when she told him he needed to eat protein, he said, what's a protein? Yeah. So we had to finally tell him, if it had a mother,
I'd like to know, what is a protein?
If it had a mother, it's probably protein. And then there's all the plants and stuff, but we didn't want to confuse it. So she had me come because we were eating either eating out together or I was cooking for him. So we had become friends. Got married a year later, but I only wanted to be friends. And so while I was there, she had been a ballroom dancer, and she had hurt her foot, and she hadn't been on, or her leg, and she hadn't been able to dance for a while. Now the doctor said she can do it, and she had fear of hurting herself. So she asked Larry to hypnotize her, and I'm like, and I felt like a child as they sent me out to the waiting room. so that Larry can hypnotize her. So when Larry came out, I said, "Excuse me, hypnotize her? How do you know how to do that?" And because I knew his father had Hobby Lobby and that he'd been in vaudeville, sort of like same thing, How did you know how to do that? Same as Pauline. And so there are a lot of similar parallels between Pauline and Dave, their relationship working together in business, same as Larry and I, as we've gone through the same similar thing. So that is how I got to know about hypnosis.
But even when you were both still working then, right? This is pre-retirement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Larry,
So you both had different non-hypnotic careers, and you still weren't practicing hypnotists at that point. You weren't even trained at that point. So there's another vignette that we really have to have, is how you got there.
Well,
so
Sean Michael Andrews is a hypnotist that we have a lot of respect for. He is a huge Elman fan, and he was researching, and he's also a top researcher, and knew about research from his field. And he was going to find Dave Elman's sons, and he found Larry via his a little computer company he had in Florida, and also working for doing aviation history for our mobile arts and craft company. And so he discovered him, and he called, and he was up in Maryland, and he asked Larry if he could come in and interview him. And he got there, and the two of them sat in this library for hours and hours.
She says to him, "Do you know any place that teaches this?" And Sean, who was very easy to embarrass, turns brick red and says, "I own a school that teaches this."
So,
I just registered.
and so then it started as I was learning. Sean got Larry a guest speaking spot at the NGH conference in 2009. And Larry knew that people had made inquiries over the years of his dad and his dad's teachings, but no idea until we got there how iconic he was. And it was just such an eye-opener. And so then when the message boards and boards and small, Facebook didn't exist yet, but there would be groups like Hypno Thoughts, and I was afraid to get on to any of those things because they would see my name Elman and think I knew something. So I avoided that for about a year, and I just kept grabbing all the education I could. We went to 5 or 6 conferences and started speaking, because I started saying, "Oh, there's got to be other places to speak," and I started researching it. And then it was actually Valerie Austin, who had visited last night on Larry's birthday bash. She was from London, and she did a conference at the Shepperton Film Studios and invited Larry to speak. And that's where I met Sheila Granger. I mean, who, I've been working with her, and so have you, Denise, for years. And so, and it just opened our eyes, and we still did a little of the aviation history. It was actually sort of good timing because the crash had happened, and grant money that for a lot of the programs we were doing had dried up. So now it was like, okay, well, let's do hypnosis. And it started growing, and we've been doing it since. So our conference is based on bringing people. I think our first one, we had 90 speakers from 20 plus countries. We have speaking doctors, dentists, psychiatrists, psychologists, hypnotists, NLPers, Reiki. So we have taken all the little things that have branched off from overall hypnosis and complementary medicine, and had people come and speak on it, and do panels. And it's not doing videos and just going and downloading the videos and watching them. It's
although you can do that too. You are able to.
Well,
you can't go to all 3 rooms at the same time.
You can.
Yeah.
But that will be, the videos will be up maybe a week after,
Right.
they'll be up there, so they can get cut, because it's 90 hours of instruction. And but also the chat rooms are open, so you could talk to people in the rooms. And then we have a 4th room called the Dave Elman Internet.
You can show people that photo if you like, at least on the YouTube
yes.
side of this. Yes, Dave Elman Cafe,
Yes.
where you can meet hypnotists from everywhere.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. And this way, you really get to network. You get to talk to the speakers. So we actually have, this year, when we put out for speaking engagements, we ask people who would like to be moderators and who would like to be baristas. And so they'll actually be speakers from the conference being the baristas, and then we'll have some scheduled events in there also. So it's great. And this year, the first was, how did Dave influence you? And this one is more looking at the theme of it this time is evolving hypnosis together. And that's what we do. We exchange ideas. Every time a hypnotist is out there speaking about hypnosis, all of a sudden there are people in the area that are looking for hypnotists to help them with different things. So they do have their purpose, Martin. It's just, are they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm all for
how-
supporting each other. And I absolutely agree. Providing the right message is put out there. It doesn't matter who's putting the message out there. It helps the whole profession.
Yeah,
Exactly. So,
but I do think that the message needs to be, yes, you could be a hypnotist, but make sure you've really trained in it. Don't just
continue training.
Take the weekend course. It's a taster. It's wonderful. My foundation course, which was free, was a 1-month course that the school was then offering as a promo, and I did that. And by week 2, it was, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. But then I went and took a full course. So I think for most people, including physicians, it takes a while to learn how to maneuver in real time. Doctors have an advantage because they've been maneuvering in real time with patients, doing other things, because things change all the time and everybody's different. But you still need to give your skills a chance to mature before you let loose on the rest of the population. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was wonderful. I really appreciate it. And for anybody who is curious about the Dave Elman Legacy Conference, links to register, or at least to take a look at the syllabus, is below in the show notes on both the podcast and the YouTube channel.
Absolutely. And thank
you
you both.
Thank you very much.
Oh, our pleasure. Absolutely our pleasure. Thanks.
I know.
We hope you've enjoyed listening. Please remember, this podcast is designed to give you an insight into therapeutic hypnosis and is for educational purposes only. So remember, consult with your own healthcare professional if you think something you've heard may apply to you or a loved one.
If you found this episode useful, you can apply for free continuing professional development or CME credits using the link provided in the show notes. Feel free to contact either of us through the links in the show notes. Join us again next week.